Welcome to the Chapel Thrill Podcast with Hunter Caparelli and JJ Jones.
What's going on, Tar Heel Nation? Welcome to the 11th edition of the Chapel Thrill Pod, your home for all things Carolina basketball. Hunter Caparelli, sideline reporter, studio host, analyst for ACC Network Extra. And joining me is my co-host, former UNC football wide receiver JJ Jones. JJ, since we aired our last episode, we were just speaking about it off air. Even though it was 2 weeks ago, it almost seems like 2 months ago. It was the day after our last episode aired that the news came out that Carolina's freshman superstar forward Caleb Wilson had broke his right thumb in a non-contact drill in practice on Thursday, March 5th. That then required surgery that would rule him out the rest of the season. It was a blow to all Tar Heels fans who were hoping to see him potentially return from his wrist injury that happened to his left wrist. This was then his right hand, his right thumb, separate injury that happened during practice that ruled him out the rest of the year. And it was really a big, heartbreaking blow to UNC fans. He had been cleared for individual workouts that week, and then when he was trying to rejoin the team for the last regular season game against Duke, he broke his thumb. The Atlanta native was Carolina's leading scorer, averaging close to 20 points per game and 10 rebounds per game. He had been a two-time National Player of the Week, and he actually was marked a second-team All-American, which means he'll end up getting his jersey up in the rafters, but definitely a major blow to the Heels. But since we had our last episode, UNC, they fell to Duke, which wasn't too much of a surprise without Caleb Wilson in the regular season finale. The Heels then took the short flight to Charlotte for the 2026 men's ACC basketball tournament. They had secured the double bye even with the Duke loss and the number 4 seed in the tourney. That then set up a rematch with 5-seeded Clemson in the quarterfinals. So we'll break down that performance, even though the Heels fell by 1 point in that game. And we'll also preview their game tomorrow, first round of the March Madness tournament against 11-seeded VCU. The Heels got in as a 6 seed, so we'll preview that game and a potential second round matchup against 3-seeded Illinois. So JJ, let's get into it. Right now, initial thoughts, opinions on the Caleb injury, how you think it impacted the ACC quarterfinal loss against Clemson, and how it may potentially impact UNC's March Madness hopes here down the stretch.
Yeah, just that Caleb Wilson injury was just a blow to UNC basketball and just to the fans in general. Just that happening right before the game. We're expecting him to come back from his wrist injury. We're all excited. I know I was a fan of him going into that Duke game being a big factor. And then we hear the news that he breaks his hand in breaks his thumb in a non-contact injury during
just
practice.
Everybody dunking the ball. Yeah.
Just try to dunk the ball.
Yeah.
You know, I know he's young. He's probably trying to get back extremely quickly. I understand that, but that's a whole story for another day. But I know that was just a big blow for UNC fans. And him not playing in that Clemson game, I think it did go a long ways. If you watched that game, and Hunter, you were there. I know you're going to touch on it in a little bit. They just lacked that effort, that energy, that spark that I think Caleb Wilson would have brought when he came back. That would have been the perfect time for him to be back and bringing that spark, bringing that energy. And that's what they just missed throughout that game. And I think those two losses were 2 great games for Caleb Wilson to go out there and dominate in the fashion that he had prior to his injuries.
Totally. I completely agree. I was at the tournament covering it for Carolina. I was in the tunnel when they were warming up. They seemed super hype. Elijah, who we'd had on the show a couple of times, he had the boombox speaker going. They were getting super hyped for the game. So I was super excited about how they might come out against Clemson. And they just seemed a little flat. I don't know really what it was. I don't know if it was because of the Caleb injury, the fact that they maybe thought they were going to have him for the ACC tournament, and then it comes out he would be out the rest of the year. I thought they came out a little flat. I just didn't think they defended well enough and played offensively well enough to win the game. I think to complicate matters even more, Clemson has been a super physical team all year. We saw that when they came into the Dean Dome and almost beat UNC a few weeks ago. Carolina pulled the game out at the very end thanks to some Luka Bogavac's heroics. But they've always been a really physical team, a well-coached team. And there was definitely a lot of energy in that final 3 minutes from Carolina as they were eventually able to cut a 15-point deficit from the 3:30 mark to a 1 point deficit at the 3-second mark. But I think the Heels were just outplayed the prior 37 minutes. JJ, do you think that loss will potentially impact how UNC comes out in this game coming up tomorrow against VCU?
Absolutely. I think I saw something earlier where Henri Veesaar said they have a chip on their shoulder now. And I
Totally.
understand that completely. That's your first game in the ACC tournament and you go out like that in that fashion. I think the basketball team, they understand that that's not what UNC basketball is about, and they understand their fans are frustrated, the team's frustrated, the coaching staff's frustrated as well. But going out like that in the ACC tournament when you're playing your first game
Yeah.
like that, you don't want that as a player. And I understand in the locker room, I know they're all talking about it. So I think this will definitely be fuel to the team for this next game against VCU. I think they're going to go back, look at what went wrong. Like you said, just very lackadaisical in the first half, and they really didn't seem like they wanted to be there until the last 5 minutes of the game.
Right.
But again, this is March Madness, so all that I
All
know
bets
people
are
talk
off.
about all
All
bets
bets are
exactly.
off.
Everything is all out the window now. I know you talk about the ACC tournament. You want to win that tournament for seeding purposes and for bragging rights. But it comes down to March. It comes down to this tournament right here. And this is when UNC needs to play their best brand of basketball. And I know that this loss against Clemson in the ACC tournament is going to be fuel. But again, you got to put that behind you. This is basically a whole new season. This is like AAU. This is win or go home. So they got to go out there and they got to be ready to play.
I think touching back on the ACC tournament loss, I think a lot of fans were super excited for a potential round 3 of Duke UNC in the semifinal. And I think they almost looked past the Clemson matchup. They were already looking forward to the semifinal game Duke had just survived against Florida State right before the UNC game to get into the semifinals. So I think fans were maybe even looking ahead. I don't know if the team was looking ahead. We won't know that for sure, but they definitely seemed a little flat in that game. Brad Brownell's team for Clemson, they shot almost 50% from the field, 47% from 3. They hit 19 threes. UNC last week, their offense was just largely at UNC the week before when UNC had beat Clemson. Their offense was largely dependent on RJ Godfrey, their top player. But in that loss, I think they just were able to spread it around. 6 different Clemson players had finished in double figures. So just defense really wasn't there, especially in the second half. And by the time the offense woke up, it started with Henri Veesaar. It was just too little too late. Veesaar did have a great game. He had a career high 28 points and a career high 17 rebounds. So I think he's going to be the one to fuel the fire if the Heels are going to go on a run here in the tournament, especially without Caleb. Every game Caleb hasn't played, Veesaar had been the one to need to step up and take over the mantle. I think Trimble has also been that secondary player without Caleb to really get in those minutes and score more, defend better, play more minutes that were Caleb's minutes would potentially be. JJ, which players are you potentially looking out for to maybe step up in this first game against VCU with Caleb obviously out?
I'm gonna have to go with another big man in Jarin Stevenson. I think he's played very well in the upgraded minutes he's had towards the back end of the season. And one thing I noticed in particular was that Zayden High didn't get as many minutes in this Clemson game as he usually has. I think they brought in Jaden Young, who got, let me look, about 12 minutes in this game, which is a lot more than he has earlier throughout the season. But again, Jarin Stevenson in general, who's been picking up a lot of the slack in that front court, because I know Henri Veesaar is going to get his. Again, 28 points, career high. Great game for him. He's played extremely well. But when he comes out, then you have to have Jarin Stevenson is your main big man. And I think he's going to have to continue to play past his standard. He's got to play extremely, extremely well. I mean, he's playing good for a role player that he thought his role was going to be like when he got to UNC. But now Caleb Wilson isn't there. And if Henri Veesaar comes off the floor, he's got to be the guy. So he's got to continue to play well. I think he's done very good recently. But again, if I had to pick one guy who has to continue to be well outside of Veesaar and Trimble, it has to be Jarin Stevenson.
I completely agree. I think Jarin, he's had a couple big games, especially that Virginia win, which was one of the biggest wins for Carolina this season. That was one of his best games of the year. I think he's really going to need a top scoring game, a top defending game, grab some rebounds for them to not only beat VCU, but maybe potentially go farther in the tournament. going back to that Clemson loss, there was also just I was taking some notes during the game. I thought there was a stretch when Carolina just couldn't get the ball to Veesaar, which kind of provided Clemson an edge that the Clemson was up 39-31 at halftime. I thought that was largely due to there was a 10-minute stretch in that first half when the Heels were 3 for 14 and they just couldn't get Veesaar the ball. They got a little too 3-point happy and kind of lost his involvement in the offense. I think without Caleb Wilson, he needs to be the central point of the offense, whether it's getting him the ball at the top of the key, down low, short corner. I think he needs to get touches on every possession, whether he's scoring or not, because I think if he at least gets those touches, it'll attract defenses towards him where he could potentially then spray it out for an open shooter or just take it himself if they're not going to bring over a double team. Against this VCU squad, we'll get into it a bit now. They're ranked 43rd in the net. They have a 45th ranking in KenPom. So even though quad one wins don't matter anymore because the tournament's starting tomorrow, it would technically be a quad one game. As far as comparisons to VCU, I know people are always trying to well, how good are they? Before we compare them, this is a team that had to get into the tournament because they won their A10 final. If they hadn't won their conference tournament, the board director for the NCAA committee said that they wouldn't have gotten in. So this is a team that wouldn't have gotten into the tournament if they didn't win their conference tournament. They do get in. Some comparables, SMU is around that same spot. So SMU also got in as 11 seed. They're around the same metrics as a VCU, as well as a Clemson, who's a little higher. So we're looking at a team that is definitely going to put up a fight against Carolina. They're a 2.5-point underdog. So the spread isn't too big. This game is going to happen in Greenville, South Carolina. So not too far from Tar Heel Nation. So hoping Heels fans will travel well. And the game starts tomorrow at 6:50 on TNT. JJ, first of all, I mean, we talked about it a little bit so far, but what are you just most excited about the game going into it, with it kicking off tomorrow and just the overall tournament kicking off tomorrow?
I'm just excited for March Madness basketball. I think every college basketball fan, this is what we live for throughout the season. Yes, it's great to win regular season titles and conference titles, but we're here for March. It's called March Madness. Sure. It's trademarked. This is what we love to see. And I think it's really awesome that UNC gets to play pretty close to home for the first time in a while and against a very respectable VCU team. I believe they've won 16 of their last 17 games. Again, a very respectable team, but like you alluded to earlier, a 2.5-point spread, I would kind of take that as an embarrassment if I'm the UNC basketball team. You look at this squad, they're in the A10. They have some pretty solid opponents that they've played. I know they lost to NC State earlier in the season, 85-79. So we have some similar opponents. But again, going into this game, at Carolina, you have that Clemson loss in the tournament that should add fuel to the fire, and you're playing against one of these teams who barely got into the tournament. You have to go out there and you have to dominate in a strong fashion just to show people that, this UNC team is still a great basketball team in the tournament. You got to make runs. You got to get hot. And I know I alluded to Jarin Stevenson earlier, but I was just thinking, when you think of a team who has these Cinderella kind of runs, you have to have a guard that plays outside of their mind. And then whether it's Seth, whether that's Derek Dixon or Kyan Evans coming off the bench and having some great minutes, we need a guard to step up in this game tomorrow and just show who he is to the world. He needs to have a name for himself tomorrow in this game. So whoever plays very well tomorrow at the guard spot for me is going to get tremendous flowers from me, because I expect to see that from them for the rest of the tournament if they want to make a deep run tonight.
You mentioned Dixon. He had some late game heroics in that Clemson loss where you've seen flashes of it this year. You saw it when they beat Kentucky on the road, hitting that clutch three. You saw it when he had a clutch three in the Duke comeback win. And then even though the Heels weren't able to come back in that Clemson loss, you saw a bunch of clutch threes down the stretch from Dixon. So I think he's definitely someone else who could step up and potentially be an X factor to not only beat a VCU team that the Carolina's projected to beat, but then also potentially upset a team like Illinois. Going back to VCU, some of their notable wins, you were mentioning it. They've beaten South Florida, which is a tournament team. They defeated Virginia Tech, who was on the bubble, an ACC tournament team that didn't make March Madness, but still solid opponent. And then they swept Dayton this year. They went 3-0 against Dayton in the A10. So some so-so good wins. But I think the most notable fact is they've won their last 16 of their 17 games. So even though they don't have too many great wins, they definitely caught hot. And I think that's what Hubert and the rest of the squad has to be noteworthy of. This team's going to come in with fire. They're going to think they're coming in with the potential to upset Carolina. A lot of media people in the stratosphere have been projecting VCU to potentially upset UNC, mostly because they see the Caleb Wilson injury, and I think that that's a major reason for it to be a hot upset pick. But I think Carolina has to go in this game, like, throw everything out the window. They start off 0-0, and it's a new season. I really think that, and I think if they go into this game, I think they can definitely handle business. VCU, they don't have too many players who have gotten hot offensively this year. They have two guys who average just over 13 points a game, sophomore guard Terrence Hill Jr. and junior forward Veesaar Djokovic. So I think if they hone in on those two players defensively, I think the Heels will be able to not only keep up with VCU offensively, but should be able to handle business. JJ, what's one thing you think the Heels have to do to defeat VCU tomorrow night?
I think they just need to see the ball get in the rim for the first time in a while. Just get comfortable shooting beyond the arc. Like you said, this is the kind of team where they don't have a lot of scorers. So whenever you get up ahead, you got to just continue to put the ball into the rim, man. Like you said, only two players average more than 13 points. I think this would be a great matchup with Veesaar and Djokovic down low. I think they kind of have similar bodies. They don't play the same. I think Veesaar is clearly the better player, but again, it's March, so anything can happen. I guess you put Trimble on a guy like Hill, and then you let everybody else go ISO, man. It's just this is one of those games where they just have to go out there and just ball out. Like, they have the players who are better than this VCU team. Again, like I said, I know it's March, but at the end of the day, you got to go out there and you got to make a lot of plays, especially on the offensive end. It seems like we've been very lackadaisical, and the ball just hasn't been going in our favor recently. But, teams get hot, and hopefully for the Heels, they decide to get hot tomorrow night.
I think VCU, we mentioned they have two players who scored just above 13 points. No one else averages in double figures, but they definitely spread the ball a little more. It's more of a spread offense, and they have spread scoring. So I think it's just going to be one of those games where they're going to have to not just focus on VCU's two top scorers, but then be wary of other players potentially being able to get hot. Again, as a team who plays fast, but UNC can play fast as well. So I think they just have to control their pace and play their game. This is a mid-major team that could potentially look to muck it up. So I think the Heels just can't let that happen. According to Ken Palm, VCU is actually 60th in defense and 46th in offense. So they're not too great defensively. They're not too great offensively. So I think they just can't let this mid-major team muck it up too badly. I think they'll be able to take care of business. If we're going to look ahead a little bit, if the Heels do defeat VCU tomorrow, it's making up for a potential matchup in the second round against the 3-seeded Illinois Illini, assuming they take care of business in the first round. Illinois, they're definitely a much better team than VCU. They're ranked 8th in the net, 7 in Ken Palm. This is an Illinois team who has played well all year in the Big Ten. They got in as a 3-seed under Brad Underwood, who's in his 9th year coaching the Illini. He's had one Elite 8 appearance. He's won 3 Big Ten championships. And this year specifically, they've had a couple big wins. They beat Texas Tech earlier in the year when they had a healthy team with JT Toppin. They had a big win on the road at Purdue earlier in conference play. They beat Nebraska on the road, which is another big win as well. So they've had a couple of big wins, but they've also had some scratch-your-head losses. They lost to Wisconsin at home by 2 a few weeks ago. They lost at UCLA, a 7-seed in the tournament this year on the road. So I think this is definitely an Illinois team who has been able to play up to the potential and play down to the potential, kind of similar to UNC. So I think this is definitely a game where if it does come to be where Carolina plays Illinois on Saturday, I think it really could be a flip 'em just based on the fact that Illinois, even though they have one of the best offenses in the country, I don't think their defense is too
Yeah.
strong where the Heels could definitely find holes to infiltrate. JJ, what are
Mhm.
your thoughts on potential upset probability for Carolina to beat Illinois in that second round matchup?
Honestly, I think it's gonna be a little tough. Again, I
Yeah.
think Illinois does have an amazing offense, and I think to know as well. I mean, they're the tallest team in terms of average height in the country, so that's going to pose a significant threat on the boards for our bigs outside of Veesaar. So just that right there is going to be hard because you have a guy like Veesaar who plays well. He's a very big guy, but then we get to Stevenson and High and
Right.
Powell and those guys in our front court. It gives me a little bit. I'm a little nervous in terms of Illinois being able to out rebound us. But again, like you said, Illinois doesn't have the greatest defense. And I
Mhm.
think when UNC is hot, they are hot, and
Right.
we've seen that throughout the season. And I believe that if they come out and play their best game, that it is definitely a toss up. I mean, they come out
Right.
there and they play the way they're supposed to. The guards get hot. You have guys coming off the bench getting hot. Bogavac does his role. Dixon does his job. Trimble, shuts them down
Right.
shuts them down on the defensive side because they're such a good offensive team. I think that this team definitely can win that toss up flip. But again, we gotta get past VCU first. I
Yeah.
definitely don't
Gotta
want to
get
look
back
past
VCU
it.
first.
Gotta
Yeah.
get by VCU. But again, if we do look ahead, I think this Illinois game is going to shape up to be definitely 50-50. I don't know what the analysts will say.
Yeah.
I think just Caleb Wilson not being a part of this team for this tournament is what's
Right.
hurting this team so
Oh,
bad
for sure.
in terms of just storylines. And I'm
Right.
not saying the team is any worse. I mean, Wilson is definitely the best player on the team, but just the storylines that analysts and people are saying is definitely messing this team up in terms of, I guess, just like I said, storylines.
Yeah, I mean, with Caleb, I think Final Four is definitely like the ceiling for this team. I think
Yeah.
without him, you're potentially looking at Sweet 16 as the ceiling,
Mhm.
which if they were to beat Illinois in the second round, that would get them to the Sweet 16. But without Caleb, they haven't really fallen off too much defensively. Their
Mhm.
defensive metrics are actually somewhat aligned with Illinois'. They've actually been pretty strong without Caleb defensively. It's been their offense that's hurt a little more. So again, they would really just have to find ways to infiltrate that Illinois defense, assuming they play them in the second round. Illinois has 5 players who average double figures. You could start with their freshman superstar, Keaton Wagler. I mean, the fact that this guy was off everyone's radar, he wasn't even projected in NBA mock drafts at the beginning of the year, and now he's projected to go in the lottery in June is unbelievable. He averages close to 18 per game, so he's definitely a guy that Carolina's going to have to watch out for. The fact that you can't even find his profile bio on ESPN tells you more than enough that no one even knew who this guy was going into the season, and he's definitely Illinois' top player that I think you're going to have to throw at Trimble. You're going to have to throw different defensive matchups at him
Mhm.
in a game against Illinois. And from that point on, you basically have to get European kind of minor to read off some of their last name pronunciations because Illinois they have a lot of international players. You start with Andreas Stojakovic, Peja Stojakovic's son. He's played really well this year. The transfer from Cal, he's averaging just over 13 a game. You then go to their freshman forward, David Mirkovic, who's averaging just over 13, and then their junior senior, Tomislav Isavic, another one of their starters who's averaging 10 points and close to 6 rebounds. So they have a lot of Europeans to complement Keaton Wagler and Killian Boswell, which I think is why they've been really good this year. Europe has obviously grown exponentially in talent over the past
Mhm.
few years. So they're definitely a really strong team. They've been a great team this year in the Big Ten, but I'm not counting Carolina out. I think they definitely have a shot to beat them if they play well. I think they really just have to strike that magic they saw in that 4 game win streak stretch without Caleb towards the end of the season before that Duke loss. I think if they play well enough offensively, I think they'll definitely be in it in the last 2 minutes. And from there, who knows? But JJ, we'll go big picture now. Assuming we won't assume anything, but looking a bit down the stretch, I'll ask you: have you made your bracket yet with the tournament starting tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you
My
got your
bracket has been
bracket.
done for about 2 days now. And I
Yeah,
looked over it. I am that guy that makes multiple brackets based on multiple different scenarios. I know people hate
right.
those kind of guys, but I ended up making three different brackets. One was personal choices, where UNC ends up winning the national championship.
Of course.
Then I had the biases and me picking the high seeds, and then I had another bracket with where I think these great upsets happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got the main one that I have on here. Yeah, it's I think it's pretty good. So
Yeah, there's definitely some interesting regions if we're looking at it from an overall standpoint. I think the East region with Duke as the top seed is super interesting. The fact
hmm
that the coaches in that region include John Shire, Rick Pitino, Bill Self, Tom Izzo, Mike Cronin, Dan Hurley. Those are all coaches who have coached in a Final Four. I thought that region was super interesting. They're calling that the blue blood region, and that's without Carolina. So I think that's a super interesting region. I think Carolina's region specifically, I've heard some people mentioning it as the pressure region, just because of a lot of teams in that region that are potentially under pressure. I don't know if UNC is potentially under pressure. The fact that Caleb is out, but you look at a team like Florida looking to go back to back. I think they're a team that's under pressure, and I think there's a few other teams in that region that are under pressure. You look at a team like Vanderbilt, who came off the SEC tournament super hot and SEC really hot. I know they're going to want to go on a run. You look at Illinois, Brad Barnell has never made a Final Four. Oh, excuse me, Brad Underwood has never made a Final Four, so he's there to have a chip on his shoulder. And Houston,
Clemson.
Clemson. I mean, there's a lot of teams in that region that are going to be under pressure. You look at Houston, a team that's never won a championship. They were in the championship last year and lost. I think they're going to be a team that's potentially under pressure, and they potentially even get to the Final Four. So definitely a lot of super interesting regions. If we look forward to the Final Four, if you had to make a Final Four, like definite Final Four picks, not necessarily off of your heart, but off of your mind. Who do you think will end up in the Final Four a few weeks from now?
Viewers, you are going to hate me with a passion.
Yeah.
I am the stereotypical guy who puts all one seeds in his Final Four. And just for that reason, I only say that because I believe it was last year or the year before that I put all one seeds, and it was correct. And I had
Yep.
I had the perfect Final Four, and I had the perfect national championship matchup. But again, I think just the one seeds this year are just so dynamic, man. They
Right.
are so powerful. I think you could go either way. Um, I have Duke, Florida, Arizona, and Michigan
Yeah.
clearly in my Final Four. I still believe that Duke is the hottest team in the country. I think whenever they play at their fullest strength, I think it's very hard to stop them. But I also believe that Arizona is a great team as well. So
Yeah.
in my Final Four, I have Duke, Florida, Arizona, and Michigan. In the national championship, I have Duke playing Arizona, and I just couldn't give Duke the win though, so I
Yeah.
had to go with
Yeah.
Arizona. I had to put Arizona win the national championship this year, man. I know it looks really ugly having all one seeds up there, but again, that's
No,
just
I mean
if
it's
I'm being real and using my
yeah.
mind, these four teams are number one seeds for a reason.
Right.
They wouldn't be there. I know, I guess if somebody just randomly picked all the high seeds, this would be it. But I mean, they are all the number one seeds for a reason. And
Yeah.
I trust me, I had to do research because I was like, I really don't
Yeah.
want to do it. But again, I had to.
No, it's interesting you say that. We didn't share our bracket picks before the show started. My Final Four, I do also have the four one seeds. I look back at last year's tournament, the fact that it seems like since NIL has really infiltrated the
Bingo.
college athlete atmosphere, I think that's really kind of infiltrated where the bigger teams with more money have really been able to pull in greater talent over the offseason through the transfer portal, through recruiting. I think that's resulted in not as many upsets in earlier rounds. because some of these top teams are so good. And then B, when you get to that Sweet 16 Elite Eight games, even before the Final Four, I think some of those top teams, because of the amount of NIL money that's come to them, the amount of talent they have at the top of the level, as well as depth going down the bench, I think is a huge reason why we saw 4-1 seeds in the Final Four last year. And I think we could potentially see 4-1 seeds in the Final Four this year. So yeah, I have all 4-1 seeds there. According to KenPom, they're the top 4 teams. They have all 4 of those teams have great net rankings. So I have the 4-1 seeds. As far as the final, I couldn't pick Duke to go to the championship. I'm looking at it where they've been great all year. As a Duke hater, I'll admit that they've been great all year. But the fact that Caleb Foster is looking like he'll be out the rest of the tournament, and Patrick Gumba is also dealing with an injury where he might be out the first and second rounds. They're planning on getting him back, but maybe with unlimited minutes. So because of those 2 injuries, I have Florida beating Duke in their Final Four matchup. I have Arizona beating Michigan on the other side, and then I also have Arizona winning it all. I think they've been the best team all year, top to bottom. I had picked Florida to win it all last year and corrected that that prediction was correct, and I got the same sort of feeling about Arizona this year. They just have a great mix of freshmen between Koa Pete and Brandon Beeries, who are both really good. But then also just star players from top to bottom. Jaden Bradley was the Big 12 Player of the Year. So I think they just have a lot of talent that I think no team in the nation can compete with. So I have Arizona winning it all, but if Carolina was to go all the way, I wouldn't be disappointed either. So I have Arizona winning it all, but again, UNC true at heart. In my bracket, I'll mention I do have the Heels making it to the Sweet 16. I do think that Illinois game is a coin flip, and I think the Heels will keep it close and beat Illinois to get to the Sweet 16. I do think they end up falling to Houston at that point. Houston's very good. They've been very good each year under Coach Sampson. So I had them falling to Houston in the Sweet 16, but I think they at least get to that point, and I think it'll still be a success for Coach Davis and the rest of the Carolina program. And yeah, so JJ, I'll give you your lasting thoughts, opinions as we go into this first round game against VCU tomorrow.
Nah, nothing crazy. Just like you said, man, I definitely want to put an emphasis on I really don't think I think the game of Cinderella teams, and I think that's coming to a close, man, just because NIL and transfer portal. I know I was watching I think it was the NC State Texas game last night, and Charles Barkley and Dickie V and the person that was on the call, they all were just talking about the transfer portal, man, and NIL. It's just so crazy. But yeah, man, the top teams got the most money. They got the best talent, so it's really hard. It's really hard to beat those guys now.
It's made it easy for those bigger teams to kind of just poach star players from mid-major teams in the offseason, and that's really resulted in just the wide gap between really great Power 4 schools and then really great mid-major schools who are doing well during the regular season, playing against teams in their own conference. But I think when they're getting matched up against these bigger Power 4 schools, these especially last year and I think this year as well, we're not seeing as many upsets. One team I will say to watch out for is a Cinderella. I'm big on High Point. High Point. My cousin is an assistant coach on the women's team at High Point. The men's team has been just as good. Both the men and women made it into March Madness. They're 30-4. They are really good offensively. They run fast. They cause turnovers, and they're playing Wisconsin out of the Big Ten, who has been up and down this year. They've had some great wins, but also some head-scratching losses. So that would be one team to look out for. They're a 12 seed. They actually have one player who hasn't made a two-point field goal all year, but he's hit 63s. He literally just shoots threes. Nothing. I'm not joking. There's a guy.
I gotta go look at that. That's crazy.
They have a guy who just shoots threes. That's it. So when you go into the tournament, you have a guy like that who's literally just spraying it from outside. I think it could cause potential hunger alarm for a team like Wisconsin. So that's my one team to watch out for as a potential.
So you have them
Cinderella
moving
upset.
on in your tournament? You have them moving on?
I have them moving on
beating
and beating Wisconsin. That's my one big upset pick. I do then have them falling in the next round, but that's my one big upset pick. So
Solid.
I don't
That is
know.
solid.
I don't know if you have any big upset picks early in the rounds. It's tough. It's tough.
I gotta go. Kentucky fans, you're gonna hate me. You guys are
Yeah.
Kentucky every year. Santa Clara beat Kentucky.
I
That's
also
my biggest
have-
upset. I don't
I
think
also have Santa
Kentucky
Clara.
is a March Madness team anymore,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I have
Yeah,
Santa
that's our
Clara as
biggest
well.
one.
They were really good in the WCC this year against their bigger teams like Gonzaga and St. Mary's. I have Santa Clara beating Kentucky as well. I think they just were really underperforming this year under
Yeah.
Mark Pope, and I see that as a potential upset as well. But that's going to do it for this 11th episode of the Chapel Throw Pod. Me and JJ will be back to provide our thoughts and opinions on Carolina's performance against VCU in the first round of March Madness and, potentially with a win, their performance against what will likely be Illinois in the second round. So obviously hoping for a win tomorrow against VCU. That's the VCU Rams. And this is it, folks. Tourney season is here. It's the best time of the year for college basketball fans, and it's the time of the year for North Carolina players to potentially cement themselves in UNC basketball history. I mean, you look at the likes of Michael Jordan, Tyler Hansborough, Joel Berry, Marcus Page, Caleb Love, RJ Davis. Everyone thought Caleb Wilson would join those ranks because of the injury. That won't happen anymore, but maybe you see Seth Trimble, Henri Veesaar get into that stratosphere of names based off what they do in this year's March Madness tournament. So we're ready to go, and I know me and JJ are here for it. So for JJ Jones, I'm Hunter Caparelli. As always, go Heels, beat VCU.
Go Heels, baby.